Hello viewers and welcome to Romsey Abbey. As you can see, we are no longer in Romsey Abbey. I think the carpet gives it away. But it is my intention with this sample set that I want to bring you as close to playing the organ as possible. So in this video, I'm going to take you through both the original before moving into the slightly enlarged and, dare I say it, a bit more exciting and thrilling extended edition. When you fire up the Romsey Abbey sample sets for the first time, you'll be greeted with this welcoming welcome screen, which gives you a very brief introduction to the organ. It has been my intention all along to reproduce this historic organ as faithfully as possible. And then the next screen we go into is the console screen. I'm going to confess something here. I don't see the need to have animated console screens. I've never used the animated screen. It's a novelty, in my opinion. Therefore, I haven't animated this screen for you. However, you can right-click on each keyboard and do the usual auto-detect. You can right-click on the swell pedal and you can right-click on the pedals. You can also click with your mouse, the keys, and they do work. So if you pull out some stops on a swell, you want to test it, you can click away on there. You can't right-click auto-detect on the stops, however, because on the next screen, this is where you can auto-detect all of your MIDI settings for all of these stops. So this simple screen has been built using the BIS organ. The background that you see there, the wooden background, is actually a photograph of my music desk. The swell pedal Nave choir great division label is actually the choir division label here, just with the text changed, and the backdrop, the wooden black backdrop behind the stops, is also the choir black backdrop. So the stops on this screen are exactly as they are in the Abbey. Nothing has been added and nothing has been taken away. It's worth drawing your attention to the Nave division. The Nave division was added in the late 90s, early noughties by Walker themselves. So if you want to use the Nave, you can pull out all the stops, but nothing will happen. For it to work, you need to engage Nave on. And by default, there is a slight delay to that division, which my colleague and friend Jerry Martin will get into in a moment. Those of you lucky enough to have touch screens, I think particularly, I should say, portrait touch screens, the interface has been optimized for portrait, although there are landscape screens available as well. All of the stops are photographs of the original stop. As you can see, the trumpet is slightly broken, and at some point in the past it's been glued back together, and rather unceremoniously you can see the big crack where it used to be in two halves. When I went into the Abbey to record this organ, I went in there with the mindset of recreating and capturing the entire instrument as faithfully as possible, and so I think I've captured everything about it. All of the noises that the organ makes have been recorded. Some of the pipes are noisy, particularly on the pedal open diapason 16. Sometimes you actually hear quite a lot of vibration or rattle or whatever, but I've left it in. There's also a funny chiff on one of the notes on the Nave division, the 4-foot flute. You'll have to find that, but rather than taking it out, it's still in there because it's what you hear in the building. Also, I've recorded all of the noises from the stops. So when you pull out a stop, they all make different sounds. They all have different characters. I didn't just record, half a dozen stops and then randomly distribute them. No. Every stop was recorded individually. The quieter pedal is particularly exciting. I find that really exciting. What I do find really exciting, as I said in my previous video, great is particularly exciting if you get excited about this sort of thing. The great is Barker action, and it's very clicky, very noisy. Listen to this. The ambience that you can hear in the background right now is real Abbey ambience. So if we go onto the settings screen, I can turn the ambience up, you can turn it down, and you can turn the organ blower up. So the settings tab now. I spend a lot of time in here, and I suggest that you spend a lot of time in here as well. The top left of the screen, the audio levels, is where I want you to spend most of your time, because I want you to find a sound that's best for you. Everybody will have a different opinion. I know this because when I put my recordings online, people say it's too reverberant, or it's too dry, it's too this, too that, too the other. Can't please everyone. So to please everyone, I'm giving you the option to make it your own personal balance, blend of closeness or far awayness. To help you with that are these 3 presets down on the bottom left. Console, which puts you as the player on the organ bench, lots of noise from the stops, a close sound in terms of the pipes. You can move down towards the choir stalls, which I believe to be the best place to hear the organ actually, or the nave, the front of the nave, which is the east side of the nave, so just a little bit further back than the choir stalls. It's worth pointing out that the nave division at the console is very quiet, but if you take yourselves into the nave using the presets, the nave division gets louder, as it would in the actual building. Moving over to the right of the presets, you have 4 of your own memory presets. Now these affect the entire screen. Okay, so you can change anything on the screen, and you can click save to preset 1, 2, 3, or 4, and it will save to that one. If you make any changes to any of the values on the screen, for example, if I press this button here, watch what happens to preset 1. Disappears. That's to signify that something has changed beyond that preset. I'm now going to hand over to my very good friend and highly esteemed colleague, Jerry Martin, who will talk you through the delay and tuning features, after which we'll have a look at the extended edition.
Hi, I'm Jerry Martin. It's been so much fun being part of the development of the Romsey Abbey sample set, the first sample set from Beauty and Sound, and I can't wait for you to hear it. And I've really enjoyed learning about what Hauptwerk is capable of and seeing if we could innovate and do some things a little bit differently. In addition to all of the little nuances to try and reproduce that Romsey experience, one of the interesting things about the Romsey organ is the fact that most of the organ sits in front of you at the console, but there is a nave division which is remote. And one of the questions was, could we introduce latency or delay when you sit and play the actual Abbey organ? When you turn on the nave division, you hear it playing behind in the distance. And while latency is something we generally try to combat in Hauptwerk or when we're playing our virtual organs, the challenge was to try and introduce it for just a single division, and we were able to accomplish that. To give you a brief idea, I'm going to play, here is the flute on the grate. When I add the 4-foot flute on the nave, you'll hear it speaks just a little bit behind, and that really adds to the authenticity of playing and also adds to the vibrancy of the sound, which you'll hear on the recordings. The swell also has delay because the swell division is much higher in the organ case. The second feature I wanted to briefly show you is our tuning feature. Now, one of the challenges with digital organs and sample sets is when they're tuned perfectly, they just don't quite sound real because that's not how the real world is. And we're used to perfectly tuned sample sets and a detuning slider. So we took a slightly different approach. So Romsey is available in the pitch at which the samples were recorded, and then Richard systematically and manually went through each pipe, each rank, each perspective, and did some touch-up tuning. So we basically have, as it was recorded in the space versus the manually tuned up version, and you can choose any perspective in between. To illustrate this, I'm just going to draw the great 8-foot trumpet and the 15th, not something that you would commonly use, but this will let you hear this well. We're going to play a B major chord as recorded. And as you'll hear, that pitch drops. Romsey is kind of sharp across the board, but there were some pipes more than others. So just to hear that again, this is the manually tuned, now moving back towards as recorded. So you can imagine that effect applied through the whole organ, that as recorded, it is as beautiful as it is in that space, but if you want, you can apply a certain amount of tune-up to freshen up that tuning. We really can't wait for you to get your hands on this sample set and look forward to hearing it on Beauty and Sound.
Huge thanks to Jerry Martin, without whom the sample set wouldn't be here today. We're now going to have a look at the extended edition. So when you fire it up, you will be greeted with that very welcoming welcome screen. And I'll just read at the bottom. It says, "It has been my intention to reproduce this historic organ as faithfully as possible and to imagine what this organ might sound like if it were to be enlarged for modern liturgy and repertoire. All of the extended ranks derive from existing Walker ranks, and I'll go through that later, and nothing about the existing ranks have been changed, other than several of them being moved around." Okay, so the console now looks a little bit different. We now have 4 manuals. We have a solo division on the top, swell, great choir, and also 2 swell pedals. The one on the right is the swell, the one on the left is the solo division. The simple screen now looks like this. So we have a much more comprehensive organ suitable for modern and romantic repertoire. Everything on here is Walker. Let me give you some examples, and you can read more about this on the About tab. I actually go into all of the stops in detail about where they came from and my thinking behind them. So, for example, the swell flute 4-foot, which the real organ so desperately needs, is simply an extension of the 8-foot stopped diapason. It's basically played up the octave, with very little voicing done to it. Similarly, on the choir, there is now a 2-foot, which is an extension of the 4-foot. The real organ actually doesn't have any brightness at all on the choir division. It just goes up to the principal 4 and the stopped flute 4, with nothing above that apart from the clarinet and the tuba. Flute harmonique is the Clarabella 8 on the great. This is the Clarabella. It's quite a wide, colourful sound, and the flute harmonique just is slightly broader. Down on the pedal, we now have a double trumpet, which comes from the swell double trumpet. It's the same stop, so it is enclosed. A very naughty but essential contra trombone, which comes from the trombone 16, just brought down the octave. On the swell, we have a double trumpet, which is an extension of the cornopian 8-foot. The flute, which I've mentioned already, such an essential stop, and beautiful as well. And then with the 8-foot. And then some strings which come from the choir, gamba and dulciana. They've just been ever so slightly adjusted. The Voix Celeste is tuned flat, which was common on walk organs of its time. So as you can see, it's a very comprehensive specification now, which will lend its hand to, I think, all kinds of repertoire. The Help tab is just a very brief overview of the console screen and the settings screen. If you have any questions or any queries, have a look at that screen first. And if you don't find your answer there, feel free to email me at hauptwerk@beautyandsound.co.uk. We also have an About tab where I talk in a little bit more detail about my own interpretation of why we've extended this organ the way we have. This organ deserves to be better known, and so I wanted to capture the entire experience of playing this organ. So I captured it, put it into a box, and I'm giving it to you. I hope that you enjoy it as much as Jerry and I have enjoyed putting it together. If you do have any feedback, please do get in touch with me in the usual sort of way. One thing that I need to do now is just give you a very brief demonstration of what this organ sounds like.